Alright, so once Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure was released, the new Weapon Master skill has allowed basically every elite specialization weapon to be accessible to all levels of class.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off.
So if you're a firebrand, you can use a longbow from the Dragon Hunter. It's pretty cool, however. I was curious to see if it changed the popularity of some of the elite specializations. And after polling the community and finding out what they think, I've compiled a list of the most popular elite specializations based off of what the community thinks that it is. Now, I will also add some feedback, perhaps to see if there is a reason why these elite specializations are so popular. So let's go ahead and get into it. So starting out for the warrior, this really came as not too much of a surprise, but the berserker was the most popular elite specialization. And there is perhaps a couple of reasons why. For starters, the elite specialization, the berserker, really doesn't change too much from the core warrior. So if you were leveling 1 to 80 and you've got used to using the burst mechanic and the adrenaline, switching over to the berserker really isn't all that difficult. You just pop into berserk, use your big smash abilities, and just go to town. It doesn't necessarily change that much. Not when compared to, say, for example, the Spellbreaker or the Bladesworn. Now, don't get me wrong, both of those are very viable and, albeit very fun, elite specializations. However, I feel that the Berserker is very straightforward, and actually recently, I'll even say in PvP, the rise of the Conditioned Berserker, which is an absolute menace, it's no question really why this is the way that it is. Now, I will say from my experience, the Berserker is very straightforward. It's a lot of fun. You feel powerful going into your Berserk mode, and everyone likes to feel that type of way, especially when they're playing in an MMO. They want to not only be seen being powerful, but they are powerful. So it's like a 1-2 punch that really gets people excited. So I can understand this, absolutely agree. I do think that the Berserker takes the cake here. Moving on to the Guardian, this one is probably more mechanically oriented than anything, but the most popular elite specialization for the Guardian is the Firebrand. Now why, you may ask, the Firebrand is the most popular? Well, the Firebrand can literally fit every basic role that is needed in almost every grouped content. They can provide some really good damage, they can provide quickness, one of the required boons for any grouped content, and then on top of that they have a ton of healing. There's really nothing that this thing can't do. Then on top of that, even whilst providing the boons, even whilst healing everything, they are providing more DPS than some of the just straight DPS that are in the group. The Firebrand is essentially a one-size-fits-all for your support, and it's just, you just can't really match it. Now, I will say that it is actually engaging gameplay, because with each one of the virtues, you get a new tome that has 5 new weapon sets, and you have to kind of be careful about how you are utilizing them. Which makes sense, of course. You want to make sure that you are providing quickness, you want to make sure that you are healing, and you don't want to burn all of your pages, so to speak, very quickly. If you take that with both the Dragon Hunter and the Willbender, those offer more offensive outlets for this particular profession, which is needed, because if you're just going to play the Guardian and it's like nothing but support, it gets old. It gets kind of tedious after a while. So this one was actually, yeah, this one was kind of pigeonholed. I really hate to say it, but yeah, Firebrand, absolutely OP. Now taking a look at the Revenant, the community voted, and I was actually a little surprised with this one, but the community voted by over 50% into the Herald as the most popular elite specialization. For the most part, I can understand why. One, it tends to be very simplistic as far as energy management is concerned, as basically all of the abilities that you get with the legendary Dragon Stance is essentially just draining your energy, and then you use them when you get low, and it's again another very straightforward, we'll say, piece. Now paired with the whole Weapon Master trait, now this is very important, the Herald can now utilize the Greatsword from the Vindicator, and what I've seen is the rise of a Greatsword Herald, because a number of their traits increase the outgoing damage that they do, all the while that they have a Greatsword. So if you are swinging a Greatsword and you have 25% increased outgoing damage, you're going to hit like a Mack truck. Before this whole Weapon Master skill was allowed, the Herald was essentially, if you wanted to go offensive, you used dual swords. And they still were an offensive powerhouse. Now it's just taken it to a whole new level. However, I will say that it doesn't necessarily change that much. This is another one similar to the Warrior that it's just fairly straightforward. There you go. You have a new set of skills that are essentially set and forget, and you just keep an eye on and pop them when they need to be popped. Again, it's one of those ones that is a very low barrier for entry for many players, and I feel like that's a reason why that the Herald went ahead and went with this. And of course, who doesn't want to use a great sword and then summon a dragon? That just sounds cool. You have become the Dragon Knight. Now, nearly by a landslide, and I kind of saw this is the most popular Ranger Elite specialization, and that is the Soul Beast. Now, why, you may ask, is the Soul Beast the most popular? Well, to put it plainly, the Soul Beast just does a lot in general, and it kind of removes the wonky pet AI that sometimes happens. So if you have played the Ranger, if you've played, for example, the Elementalist, or anything that can summon Necromancer, anything that can summon minions, sometimes they're a pain in the neck. The AI is all over the place. They're trying to figure out what you want to do, and it's a pain. Now, the Soul Beast essentially just takes that away completely. You merge with your pet, and now you are a single entity and dealing all the damage and doing what you have to do. Now, I will say that in the time that I've played the Soul Beast, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, personally, I prefer the Untamed over the Soul Beast. However, I can see why people enjoy the Soul Beast. It's one less thing to pay attention to, and it does great damage. And it's also a really cool aesthetic. You mean that you merge with your beast, with your pet, and you guys are fighting together? That's a really cool sentiment. That's something really, really interesting. And I will give them credit for that, and that is something that I can understand. I would have thought the Druid would have been a little bit more of a contender. It did come in second, but it didn't even break 20%. Most people agreed. Soul Beast, that's the way to go. So moving on to the Engineer. This one, of course, is kind of a loaded question. Oh my goodness, what's the most popular? And without a doubt, it is the Green Mech Boy in the Mechanist. Now, I know I was talking about the wonky pet AI for the Ranger, and the Mech in some cases does suffer for that. However, the Mechanist is essentially we'll say, one-stop shop for basically everything. Not only can it provide some really good damage, it has a really cool aesthetic of summoning a giant mech to fight with you. It can protect and heal allies. It can provide some crazy good boons. I mean, it kind of took this very complicated, or we'll say partially complicated spec of the Engineer, just the Engineer itself, and made it simplistic. Compared to the Scrapper and the Hollowsmith, which both have their tool belts and, mainly utilize weapon kits, the Mechanist can just subvert that completely, and then it's just boom. And on top of that, they're doing some great damage. So they're providing some great support. There's just a ton that it can do for very, very low effort. And it's not to necessarily say that it's like, oh, well, people aren't playing this because, it is the low skill cap. It's more so that if you're progressing something that's very difficult, i.e. Harvest Temple challenge mode, which is the hardest content in the game, if you're going to go and try that, you're going to want to do something that allows you to focus strictly on the mechanics of the fight and not necessarily of a super laborious rotation. You just want to be able to do your thing, press the buttons, do what you need to, and move on. I get that, I do. So I understand exactly where the Mechanist comes in, and it kind of goes around what the other two previous Elite specializations in the Scrapper and the Hollowsmith do. They both offer a lot of versatility and a lot of different things that you can do at any given time. And it kind of just makes it a streamlined effort. There you go. So this one kind of understood, expected it. Yeah, no surprises here. Moving on to the Thief. The Thief was one that I was actually expecting more people to enjoy one, but a lot more people have gone with the other. The most popular Thief Elite specialization rated by the community is the Daredevil. Now, the Deadeye was the one that I was suspecting would be more popular just because of the aesthetic and everything else. However, playing the Deadeye and especially utilizing like the rifle, it makes it harder to survive. The Daredevil just takes what the Thief is already good at, which is mobility, dodging, all of that, and takes it to another level, takes it to a slightly higher level, a Thief plus, if you will. And on top of that, it mechanically speaking, as long as you're dodging and you're making the abilities, enemies will melt. You will deal so much more damage just as long as you're timing your dodges appropriately. So I get it when someone says, oh, well, the Thief doesn't do enough, and then here comes the Daredevil, and it can dodge everything and deal a bunch of damage. And I still feel like thieves are not as prevalent in the game. I feel like I see them a lot less in comparison to the other specs, or the other classes, I should say. However, the Daredevil is one, if I do see a thief 95% of the time, it's a Daredevil. If you see a thief, it's more likely not a Daredevil. And it's just a cool aesthetic. It really does what it needs to very well. And especially if you play PvP, World v World, you're going to see a ton of these guys. You're going to see them all over the place. So this one does make sense. It just kind of continues on of what the Thief is already good at. Daredevil, most popular, makes sense. Now, moving on to the Necromancer, this one in a landslide. This one I absolutely agree with. I personally agree with, and I understand why. The most popular elite spec, the Reaper. One, you have a BA name. Let's be serious. You hear Reaper and it's like, ooh, what's he reaping? I don't know. It just sounds cool. Okay, cool. That sounds great. But the idea of the Reaper is that it takes this caster kind of ranged mage type of profession and throws it into melee to deal massive swings and literally reap the souls out of your enemies. And even just the basic attack for the Reaper is just absolutely absurd, especially when you are in Reaper Shroud. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it's like super easy, but it's very straightforward. The more that you play, the more that you'll understand it. It just feeds itself forward. I definitely agree. I think that the Reaper is, without a doubt, a great extension of what the Necromancer fantasy should be, and it just is so satisfying to pull off massive crits very quickly and just decimate groups of enemies. You can't match that feeling in other various ways in this game. And without a doubt, the most popular is Reaper, and I absolutely agree. Don't get me wrong, Scourge is pretty cool. Harbinger thematically, it's a bit out there. That one I didn't necessarily think meshed very well, but the Scourge has had its ups and downs, and it was viewed, and still kind of is actually viewed more as a support. The Reaper, absolutely, hands down, one of the coolest. Moving on to the Elementalist. Now, this is a mixed bag because this is the class that I play more predominantly than anything else. I play my Elementalist all the damn time. And I personally enjoy the Catalyst. And it seems like most of the community agrees that the Catalyst tends to be the most popular. Now, it's not necessarily to say that the Tempest or the Weaver aren't really all that out there, or they're not popular at all. But each one of these closed out with nearly 30%. The Catalyst won out with a 46. So there is some call to understand that, yes, the Catalyst is essentially the core Elementalist with the Jade Sphere. It does change some things, but it doesn't change it massively enough that it would cause issues. And I think that's the big reason why the Catalyst tends to be the most picked, is because the Elementalist is already kind of tedious in and of itself. It's a lot of muscle memory. It's a lot of remembering every individual key, the buttons, the skills, when to use them, and all that. Pairing that with, say, for example, the Weaver is just, you have a lot of buttons to press and a lot of things that you can do. You can maximize and be fantastic at it. However, if you're new to it, you might make a lot of mistakes. Now, compared to that, if you look at, say, the Tempest, which is a little bit slower with the attunement swaps, has the overloads, which are fairly straightforward, I would have thought that would have been the most popular, honestly. However, it doesn't necessarily, I feel, provide that oomph and that, we'll say, that defensibility that the Catalyst does. The Catalyst I've always felt like was super tanky, offers a lot of really good damage mitigation, has a whole bunch of auras, more so even than the Tempest. So I can kind of understand why. I would have thought the Tempest would have been a little bit closer contender, but the Catalyst absolutely wins the cake here. And lastly, moving on to the Mesmer. This one actually caught me off guard. Actually, no, it didn't. The elite specialization that is the most popular for the Mesmer is the Virtuoso. Now, the Virtuoso is an interesting case because it summons the Mind Blades and it throws them and does all these things. However, it does take away all the unique factors, in my mind, of the Mesmer. The Mesmer is all about summoning clones and phantasms. The Virtuoso just basically removes that and summons Mind Blades to be thrown. So essentially, you don't have to worry about any of the AI of the clones or the phantasms, and you just keep your daggers and then you throw them when you're ready. And essentially, you get so many daggers that you can constantly just be throwing them and never run out. It's an interesting take onto the Mesmer, and don't get me wrong, like it is unique and it is pretty cool. I can understand that. However, like, honestly, I would have thought that, like, the Mirage, which is thematically one of the cooler variations of the Mesmer, honestly, I think it's, like, the perfect variation. You have, like, this elusive assassin. Yeah, why wouldn't we do that? But if you look at, say, for example, the Chronomancer is just, the Chronomancer just has a lot of different things that you can do at any given time. It can provide support. It can do a lot of heavy DPS. So it has a lot of complexity built into it, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The Mesmer looks difficult on the surface. This is very straightforward. So you add a spec that offers a bunch of new things in the Chronomancer, and there you go. The Virtuoso, though, definitely wins out. Absolutely. It makes it very streamlined, and damn, this thing pumps some great damage. I absolutely understand why it's so damn popular. The Virtuoso just slaps. It just hits so hard. What do you think of my list? Do you agree with what the community has said? Tell me down in the comments section below. If you're interested to learn how Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure has redefined casual MMOs in 2023, click this video here. Otherwise, stay caffeinated, folks.